Well, thank you very much. And this, let me call our forum hearing to order. We've taken the liberty of inviting some individuals that will be presenting in a short while to talk about a very important item, and that is the executive order that instructed Secretary Zinke to study and review the national monuments designations immediately with Bears Ears and Escalante, and proceeding to an additional ones going back to 1996, 27 in total, and potentially more, because the caveat, there was an open caveat in there about if you see anything that occurred in a public process and you feel compelled to study those from 1996 forward, please do so. That was the executive order. His report is due Saturday, on the 10th. Press indications are that the secretary indicated that to a reporter earlier today when he finished in front of the Appropriations Committee, Secretary Zinke indicated that he was going to turn the report over to the White House and to the President, and that it was his discretion when and if and how it would be made public. Our objection to that is that we feel that the whole process in reaching any conclusions that are now recommended to the President should be public, should be for public review, including the process he went to, who he met with, and what was the consequence of those meetings, and what that report is. Indications are, too, that we're talking about a shrinking, in particular Bears Ear, which triggers all kinds of other consequences in terms of legal liability for this president, in terms of his authority to undo a designation made by a previous president. But it comes in the wake of 1 million comments in the public record in support of the Antiquities Act and in support of the designations that were made by the public in general. And it comes after that, and any shrinking, undoing, limiting to us blurs the line with about what the law says in terms of the Antiquities Act, and more importantly, goes against what is a profound and very strong and robust public opinion in behalf of the Antiquities Act and behalf of the designation. If you know the issue to me, and this review, this look at public lands and monuments in particular, is really about how it really comes down to how you open up these lands for potential extraction on the part of gas, oil, and mining. That's the motivation behind it, and that in doing so, you hear the economic argument over and over again that this is important to get our economy well and to create good jobs. Facts to the contrary are not important when those decisions are made, but that's the motivation. And particularly in Bears Ears and many of these designations, the affront to Native American tribes across this country in terms of sacred sites, cultural, historic sites of significance, and the protection that those require with a monument designation are blurred and eliminated as consideration. We're looking at opening these areas up for more extraction when there are permits already in place. 90% of BLM is already under permit for extraction as a whole across this country. They're not being used, they're being stockpiled for further speculation down the road. We've always been for the policy, if you don't use it a certain period of time, then you lose it. And so the need to suddenly open these lands up because there's such a ringing demand for permits and for extraction and exploration is a false premise. It's built on a false premise. I want to, at this point, thank Ranking Member Velasquez from Small Business Committee for being here with us. We're waiting also Mr. Tim Waltz, Ranking Member on Veteran Affairs, because I think the Antiquities Act crosses many lines, and it's not just particular to natural resources. My colleague from Natural Resources, Mr. Byer, has joined us. Thank you very much, from the committee. And with that, let me turn over for any comments you might wish to make to Ranking Member Velasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. For me, he is my chairman. Definitely, the Trump's administration review could lead to rescinding, resizing, or modifying existing national monuments. The problem from the small business standpoint is a number of small businesses rely on working around and with people visiting these national monuments and designated areas. Changing this designation will negatively affect these businesses and the environment. The Antiquities Act has served as an opportunity to protect land or water already owned by the federal government by designating them national monuments. For entrepreneurs and small business owners, this designation provides an opportunity because it means more tourists visiting those areas. When visitors tour monuments, they stay in hotels, eat at local restaurants, participate in outdoor recreation, and shop locally. Small firms have thrived because of these designations and have helped create stronger economies and stronger communities. When you have small businesses in a local community, they reinvest their money in those local communities, and they create the jobs that are so important. Take, for example, small outdoor recreation and tourism companies that generate $7.6 million domestic jobs and $887 billion in consumer spending nationally. In Colorado, the outdoor recreation economy supports 125,000 jobs, and in Utah, 122,000 jobs are supported. So just as we should preserve these monuments as a public good, we should also remember the benefits they bring to the private sector. Finally, we should note that most activity, be there drilling, grazing, or development that were permitted before in any area that has been designated, continue to be allowed. So the argument that creating monument restricts economic activity is often overstated. The Trump administration attack on existing national monuments will hurt American small business owners and our economy. Modifying the status of an existing national monument will harm small business owners. The review ordered by the president is a bad idea for the economy and for the environment, and I want to take this opportunity to thank all the members of the panel for taking your time and come before us and express your opinion and your insight into such an important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Mr. Byer, any comments you would wish to extend?
I have many, but I'd rather listen to our panelists, so thank you.
That's why we love Mr. Byers in the committee. He's a gentleman to the... Let me begin with, thank you all for coming. Some of you I know and others I don't, but I want to thank you very much for being here today. Let me begin testimony today from Mr. Hugo Turek. Did I say that correctly, sir? Thank you. Rancher, president of the Friends of the Missouri Breaks, and former chairman of the Bureau of Land Management Central Montana Resource Advisory Committee. The floor is yours, sir, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Push that little button.
Can you hear me better?
Push that little... little...
Oh, there it is. I'm used to working with horses and cows, not technology. I was on the original Resource Advisory Council created by Secretary Babbitt and Bill Clinton, and then worked on the establishment of the Upper Missouri Breaks National Monument. I'm a rancher, a public lands rancher to top it all off. And what I wrote today has a small error, and it says I graze land within the monument. No, I graze it right next to the monument. And my private land is out of the monument. So although my wife and I have often said we'd like to see it in the monuments, there'd be some protection from subdivisions and other things that take place where we haven't, because I live in a land that has no planning at all. Anyway, I'm not sure what I can do here, because when I joined up with the RAC, we had a president who liked national monuments, who saw them as useful. And we had a Secretary of the Interior who for the first time created a system called the RACs, the Resource Advisory Councils, that were created to not just have oil and gas and logging and grazing as the voices at the table. It added two big voices at an equal place, and that was conservation and recreation. And for the first time, they had a voice at the table. And today, President Trump and Zinke, Secretary, have limited the RACs. They have silenced the RACs. They no longer can hold meetings. And there's something extremely important about this that I think everybody should recognize, and that is the only planning we can have with national monuments in my area especially, but I think it's true in yours here, is when these RACs are viable and can sit down with the BLM and local community leaders, because these RACs are made up of representatives of all these various industries out there. And now we've been silenced. We have no mechanism whatsoever. I did find it interesting that they want to take a look at the Upper Missouri Breaks National Monument and then also compare it to Bears Ears. And I hope they continue to do this, because in Bears Ears there was no voice, really. It's been silenced already in everything I've read and heard and followed closely. On the other hand, in the Upper Missouri Breaks National Monument was one of the loudest voices ever created. Secretary Babbitt came to Montana. I floated the river with him because I was the chairman of the Resource Advisory Council at that time. He took me aside, then fell into the river, but I didn't drown him as people thought I was trying to do, and wanted to know if I could sit down, since I was chairman of the RAC, and the RAC would hold meetings finding out how people valued this landscape. What did they see in it? And he said, I want you to do this with local communities as close to the monument as possible. So I chose, 3 communities. I said we could do it. However, your presence out here didn't come, this isn't a surprise. We knew what you were doing, and there's already a lot of dissent. So I can guarantee you, since we are a consensus council, we won't find consensus on whether it should be designated or not. I can guarantee you that right now, because you've already seen it in the press. And if there's anything and I said that logically follows there will be no agreement then on the idea of boundaries of how big it should be. But however, we can hold meetings and find out what people value out here and how they look at this place, whether it be a cattle rancher, loggers, miners, recreationists, conservationists. And so we held meetings, 3 towns. We had, and to say we held meetings, took written comment, and then developed a set of recommendations to give to Secretary Babbitt to give, to consider. And it was really interesting, because in a place in which we are not going to find consensus on should it be designated or not, because the ranchers saw that as a threat. They still do. On the other hand, recreationists saw this as protection, for their interests. Was there anything we could find consensus on? And we did. We found at least 22 points of agreement. I'll just mention a couple of them. These points, and I'm going to send this back here, was that everyone in the area wanted the area to remain as wild and primitive as possible. as undeveloped. Everyone told us at every meeting we were at, they wanted grazing to continue, even the conservation community. And it was very easy to get the conservation community to accept this, because I remember a number of walking up at one of the meetings we had where we had the maps up there and all the BLM color in yellow and then these little patches of white. And they said to me, why should we support grazing? And I pointed out, I said, you see those patches of white? And they said, yes. And I says, that's public land. I said, that's private land. They make a living out of this by grazing. You take away grazing, they have no value on that land except now for subdivision, and of course, there's nothing that's more frightening to most ranchers, unless they're trying to sell out, than subdivisions. They wanted to see a minimization of division of development of roads and trails. They wanted hunting to continue. They actually said that they would like to see it remain under the control of the state of Montana, the wildlife, which it did. And there was a recognition that this was public land and it should remain public. They did not want to see it privatized. Now, that's just a few of many of the consensus points. One of the more humorous ones was that everybody agreed they didn't want to see low-level airplane flights over the breaks. The cattle ranchers because of cows, the recreationists because of disturbance, to their serenity. And the secretary says, well, I'm sorry, that's out of my ability. I can't address that at all. So we created that monument, or we gave him the stuff. He created the monument, and immediately there was a response to get rid of it. The first thing, okay, I have to stop. So this could go on forever. This is printed out here, copies of it, and I'll answer questions if anybody wants to. Okay?
Thank you very much, sir. And I'm sure there'll be follow-up questions, so I appreciate your testimony, and the entirety of it will be part of our record. Let me turn to the next person, Ms. Megan Duffy, Store Manager, Patagonia, Washington. Thank you for being here. 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Megan Duffy, and I'm here today on behalf of Patagonia, which is a California-based clothing and gear company with an over 30-year mission of building the best product, doing no unnecessary harm, and using business to inspire solutions to the environmental crisis. It's at the core of everything we do. I currently serve as the store manager at the Great Pacific Ironworks store in Georgetown. There isn't a better example of the promise of America's entrepreneurial economy than the story of Patagonia. Our founder and owner, Yvon Chouinard, followed his passion for the great outdoors to develop a business with over $7,500 million in sales in 2017. Yvon's business grew from a small blacksmith shop in Ventura, California, where he made climbing equipment for himself and his friends, to a global company which now does business around the world. Every step of the way, from initially re-engineering climbing equipment to be more environmentally friendly, to our most recent efforts to reuse and recycle rather than buy new, have been aimed at limiting our impact on the environment, improving our relationships with our employees, the welfare of the workers who manufacture our products abroad, and holding those all on equal footing with our financial bottom line. We're as equally proud of our product innovations as we are with our on-site daycare and our progressive family leave policies. We pioneered corporate responsibility and supply chain management and are constantly seeking to hold our company to a higher standard. As such, we pride ourselves as leaders not only in the outdoor industry, but as an example for companies and business leaders everywhere. The outdoor recreation industry is huge. Consumers spend nearly $887 billion annually on outdoor activities. Our economic sector supports 7.6 million jobs, creates $65 billion in federal tax revenue, and supports state and local governments through $59.2 billion in tax revenue there. In terms of other comparable economic sectors, we generate more spending than the pharmaceutical industry and employ more people than construction or computer technology. The passion of the Chouinard family for the great outdoors and a fundamental concern for the fate of our planet has driven our company to work hard to protect important places like Bears Ears in Utah and Katahdin Woods and Waters in Maine. We do this in a couple different ways. First, we pledge 1% of all sales we make every year to environmental causes globally. In addition, in late November 2016, we pledged 100% of our sales to, on Black Friday to environmental causes. On Black Friday, we made $10 million, which meant that we gave away $10 million. We gave away this money in myriad ways, one of which is giving to local communities and local causes. So my store in Georgetown looks at geographically close nonprofits that we want to work with, and our employees at the store level decide where that money goes. Today's hearing focuses on national monuments and the effort of the current administration to undo public land protections sought by President Obama and every other president since Teddy Roosevelt. As we're learning, our current president doesn't stick to convention and has undertaken this unprecedented review of these important places and protections. Even before the current presidential review, the current president announced this review, Patagonia fought hard against efforts in Utah by the governor and congressional delegation to undo the protection of Bears Ears. We led many other brands and eventually the Outdoor Industry Association in pulling the semi-annual trade show from Salt Lake City. Continuing to pour millions of dollars into a state actively seeking to undermine our industry by weakening environmental protection in Utah just didn't make sense. We're now putting that same energy, enthusiasm, attention, and resources towards the monument review process. Through our online sales, in-store events, and work with other businesses and conservation organizations, Patagonia has helped hundreds of thousands of Americans let Secretary Zinke know that the national monuments are supported. While we believe in all the monument designations are important, we've put particular effort towards in fighting against the Utah delegation and their efforts to minimize public and tribal support for Bears Ears. Meanwhile, we're working with attorneys to explore ways to fight this attack on our monuments in the courts, if it comes to that. Patagonia's story is an American story, a kernel of an idea by a brave risk-taker which led to a multi-million-dollar business and a brand recognizable in nearly every country. But our drive was never just for profit. Our motivation has never been just for money. From the beginning, passion, values, and hard work converged to create a company that is not only hugely successful in the traditional measure of profitability and growth, but also as an innovator for customer service, workplace benefits, and corporate responsibility. Feeding our success means supporting what sustains us, people and places. Whether it's Bears Ears in Utah, the Cottonwoods in Maine, the Chesapeake watershed outside these windows, or the Ventura River outside our headquarters in Ventura, the protection of these places is as fundamental to our mission as our next quarterly report. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Before I introduce our next panelist, let me acknowledge the presence of colleagues, Mr. Darren Soto from Florida, member of the Resources Committee, Mr. Alan Lowenthal from California, ranking member on the Resources Subcommittee, and Ms. Judy Chu from California, an esteemed friend and advocate on these issues for as long as I've been here. And we know a little bit about having to deal with a part of the Utah delegation on some issues, and we appreciate the position that your company and the industry in general is taking on this issue. Let me, someone who I had the pleasure to meet back in New Mexico when we did a tour of monuments in New Mexico, and Ms. Carrie Hamlin, CEO and President of Las Cruces Green Chamber. We had a good visit there, and great green chili that night. Thank you very much.
What we do.
With that, let me turn it over for 5 minutes to you. Carrie?
Thank you, Congressman Grijalva. And thank you to the Committee on Natural Resources, Small Business, and Veterans Affairs for hosting this forum today and allowing me to spend time with you. And I would also like to thank Congressman Grijalva, Velasquez, and Waltz. I am honored to represent the great people of Las Cruces and the Las Cruces Green Chamber today, and it is an honor to speak to you about our beloved Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. From this point on, I'll refer to it as OMDP, because if I continue to say the full monument name, it would bring me beyond my time, and she would be showing me my signs. So just to allow that I would be able to speak in the time allotted. The designation of OMDP was an over 10-year effort by 11 Native American tribes, sportsmen, conservationists, environmentalists, and religious groups. It features more than 22 miles of the Butterfield Stage Trail, Kilburn Hole National Historic Landmark, Billy the Kid's Outlaw Rock, Geronimo's Cave, 243 known archaeological sites, an estimated 5,000 plus unknown archaeological sites, the Apollo astronaut training sites, and much more. And prior to the designation, there were some reservations about the monument as ranchers were concerned about their grazing privileges, and a very small group of people felt the monument was too large. At this time, there was a great deal of misinformation on what the monument would mean to our community. However, 3 years later, we have an overwhelming amount of support in the community, and several of those voices who are in opposition of OMDP now have more information and understanding about the positive benefits of our monument. The Las Cruces Green Chamber's role in the success of OMDP is involved highlighting the economic impact the monument has had for our local businesses. Following the designation, the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce created the OMDP Marketing Toolkit. That provided businesses with the resources, materials, and marketing ideas to cross-brand the monument in their business. Some of the materials given to businesses include a Spanish and English version of our brochure, which you will be receiving information, a packet of information that you can go over, and that brochure is in there. The great thing about that brochure is that businesses were able to put their logo on the back of that brochure to cross-brand and give to their customers and clients on behalf of their business. As a result, there is the OMDP coffee blend, there is the OMDP bread pudding, there is the OMDP cupcakes, OMDP apparel from our friends at Oregon Mountain Outfitters, OMDP chili sauce, and the OMDP cocktail, which the color looks like the color of our wonderful Oregon mountains at sunset. And for those businesses that use the toolkit, 65% of those businesses surveyed field questions from customers about OMDP. 32% of them use OMDP in their promotional and marketing materials, and 20% of them have introduced new products or services directly related to our monument, including mountain bike tours, specialty drinks, running tours, wilderness first aid training, apparel, as I mentioned, iconic monument photography, and monument-inspired desserts. And in the past 3 years, events celebrating OMDP include the one-year anniversary celebration, which featured a wild game barbecue, an interfaith service on the monument, a fiesta in historic Mesilla, an OMDP art show with art inspired by our monument, and the opening night, monumental opening night for our Las Cruces Vaqueros baseball team, where I got to throw in the first pitch and actually made it close to home base. We also had the unveiling of the first of its kind OMDP Girl Scout Achievement Patch. This is now the model for other Girl Scout patches in California and in Katahdin Woods and Waters. They're already starting that conversation. And we are also in the final planning stages of our second annual Monuments to Main Street celebration that features not only the amazing events that are happening already, like our Hatch Green Chili Festival, our Salsa Festival, our wine festivals, because we take all of those things seriously, but it also incorporates hikes into the monument, a plein air painting competition, yoga on the monument, give you a second to imagine that, and we will have a mariachi concert on the monument to finish off the month. And we also have horseback trips, and some of the newest business endeavors include a bike packing trip and an apparel business that donates a portion of every single one of their sales of their shirts to assist in buying school lunches for our local kids. Our area has received a great deal of media attention as a result. Lonely Planet listed us as one of the top 10 best in the U.S. travel destinations for 2016. U.S. News and World Report featured us as one of the 3 great retirement destinations, and just recently, Reader's Digest listed us as one of the top 10 practically secret national parks, although the pictures they featured were in Arizona and not necessarily New Mexico. Our local paper corrected that. I am finishing up. So what has happened in Las Cruces serves as an example elsewhere. OMDP was made possible because of the Antiquities Act, and we can look at a number of elements that show how a community can embrace our public spaces. We talk a great deal about how this is our monument. We don't say it's the government's monument. We don't say it's the BLM's monument. We say it's my monument or our monument. And what happens is that when there's a coordinated effort of communities and groups to work together to really support the investment and the value of public spaces you cannot justify removing the Antiquities Act. Because if you are doing this, you are against sustainable economic development, job creation, and protecting our great land for generations to come. Thank you. Thank you.
War veteran, U.S. Army, now director of the Sierra Club's Military Outdoors Initiative. Welcome, Mr. Vessels. The floor is yours.
Congressman. And I'd like to thank all the committees for inviting me here to speak today on behalf of the veteran community that benefits so greatly from our public lands, specifically our national monuments. So I'll start with just telling my story briefly and as a case study for veterans in the outdoors. I was in the Army for 5 years, from 2004 to 2009. I was in 10th Mountain as an infantryman. I spent 25 months in both Afghanistan and Iraq. When I got back from Baghdad in 2009, within a few weeks I was done. My time of service was up, and I was just kind of cut loose from the support structure that had taken care of me since I was a week out of high school and a child, really. So I returned home, no real purpose, no idea what I was going to do next. Quickly began to isolate myself from the rest of the world. Spiraled into a depression. The idea of taking my own life was pretty, seemed like a relief. So I took a leap of faith and I moved out to California with an Army buddy. And shortly thereafter, I was able to take advantage of the state's plethora of public lands and just amazing access. And just getting out in the wilderness with my dog, going on hikes with friends, just getting outdoors, really, it was like night and day. It really turned my life around. I currently, I'm lucky enough to be running the Sierra Club's Military and Veteran Initiative, Military Outdoors. And since it is the 111th anniversary of the Antiquities Act, I feel like I should point out the long history of conservation movement and veterans, because I feel like, especially at the Sierra Club, I feel like people get the idea that the two are mutually exclusive, when really the Sierra Club's first military outing was when John Muir took Teddy Roosevelt into the Yosemite wilderness to show him the area, and Roosevelt fell in love with it, and pretty soon we had Yosemite National Park. David Brower, Sierra Club's first executive director, was a World War II infantryman in 10th Mountain as well. So there's a long history of veterans being engaged in conservation. With Military Outdoors, we connect service members, veterans, and their families to the lands they fought to protect. We currently get about 4,000 participants outdoors each year, whether it's through outings like hiking, whitewater rafting, or outdoor leadership opportunities. And that's just our program, not to mention Outward Bound for Veterans, veteran expeditions, and the many other groups getting veterans outdoors. With that leadership training, we're creating a new generation of community leaders and environmental stewards. We see it as a three-step process of exploring, enjoying, and protecting the planet. You're not going to protect something you don't love, and you're not going to love something unless you get to know it. So the first step is getting people out there. And I've seen, in the last 2 years I've been doing this job, I've seen how getting outdoors and learning about threats to our public lands, oftentimes in our backyards, I've seen how that reignites a sense of purpose and passion in veterans who, like myself, got out and had no idea what they were going to do, and really gives life meaning again. So one example of our Explore, Enjoy, and Protect is Bears Ears. I've been lucky enough to visit Bears Ears 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. And every year, I think this year will be the 4th year that our program's done it, but we're invited out in October to the Navajo Nation. And we participate in a warrior welcoming home ceremony and sweat lodge ceremony. So a spiritual leader will sit us down and tell us their origin story, really the history of the area and the region, and we connect. It's a cultural exchange like none other, and we really connect with the land and see the importance of it to all 5 of the tribes who form the coalition to protect Bears Ears, and everyone else who's lucky enough to visit that sacred area. While I'm out of time, I will happily answer more questions about mental health and the outdoors as well. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me now ask Mr. Robert Garcia, who is the founding director and counsel for the City Project. That City Project was instrumental in the 2014 designation of San Gabriel Mountains. There was a win for environmental and social justice organizations in California, and been a force in promoting diverse community, not only engagement, but participation in the issues that confront us on an environmental agenda. And I welcome him back. Good to see you, my friend. It's 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'd like to thank the ranking members and members of the various committees, as well as Congressman Lowenthal and the champion of the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, Congresswoman Judy Chu. Thank you so much. I am a civil rights attorney and an environmental justice attorney, a human rights attorney. I am not an environmentalist or a conservationist, but we build bridges between the civil rights and environmental communities. We consider environmental justice the environmental arm of the civil rights movement. And I am working with the Next 100 Coalition to diversify access to and support for public lands and waters in the next century, as well as Green Latinos, a national network of environmental justice and conservation advocates, and the San Gabriel Mountains Forever campaign. We oppose the review under the executive order, which is of questionable legal authority, and urge this administration to withdraw the order and cease and desist the review. First of all. Second, regarding the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, the monument serves the needs of the changing demographic of California. As President Obama emphasized when he dedicated the national monument, there are not enough parks in LA County, especially for children of color and low-income children. This is an issue of social justice and health equity. Access for all for the administration, President Obama's administration, means young and old, black and white, Latino, Asian, and Native American. We agree. I am an immigrant. We have supported diversifying access to the San Gabriels for at least a decade, working with the coalition, and since 2014, working with the Community Collaborative on a national monument. The monument serves 15 million people in the second largest urban center in the nation. It's about 340,000 acres. The area provides about a third of the water for the area. Very importantly, we emphasize the diverse values at stake. First of all, simply having fun for children and their families. Second, the health implications. Children of color and low-income children, because of the lack of places for physical activity, disproportionately suffer from obesity, diabetes, and other health issues related to inactivity. Third is conservation, including climate justice. Four is cultural values. The San Gabriel Mountains National Monument includes Native American rock art and other glyphs and evidence of sacred site. We stand with our brothers and sisters at Bears Ears. And finally, democracy, equal justice, and livability for all, including economic vitality, apprenticeship programs for youth, business opportunities for minority, women, and veteran-owned enterprises, which follow from the benefits of National Monument designation. We also support the Antiquities Act and preserving it. We oppose tinkering with it and undermining that act and undermining the rule of law. 16 presidents have designated about 152 monuments since 1906. No president has ever sought to undermine a prior president's actions in designating a monument. In conclusion, an attack on one monument is an attack on all of them. It goes beyond an attack on the monuments. It's an attack on the Antiquities Act. It is an attack on the rule of law and democratic governance in this nation. We urge you to stand in solidarity and resistance with we, the people. We are the ultimate check and balance, and we will continue to work across the nation, as well as in local communities like the San Gabriel Mountains area, like the areas around Bears Ears. Thank you very much. I have submitted our comments in writing as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcia. And to the panel, let me go directly to questions from the members that are here. They're going to call votes in a while, short while, and so rather than any other lengthy comments on the part of myself or anyone else, let's go straight to questions, and let me turn to, in order of arrival, Mr. Byer. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vessels especially, I'm very impressed with all the work that you guys are doing. You know, on the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail, they have the veterans hiking off the war. And I just looked up, it was the first through hiker of the Appalachian Trail in 1948 was Earl Schaefer, who came back to try to walk off World War II, knocked off that 2,200 miles. So I want to know when you're going to do the whole Appalachian Trail.
Hopefully one day.
But thank you for doing all your stuff to help heal the veterans that way. And Megan, thank you for, I find that every time I get a Patagonia catalog, I have to buy something so I'll get another catalog, because it's like getting a novel, or it's just so wonderful. And I want to know if you've climbed El Capitan yet.
Oh, no.
Okay.
It's on my bucket list, though.
Okay, good stuff. And I'm impressed with the idea that something like 3 times as many people working in the outdoor industry as are working in oil and gas and fossil fuels. I was up in Katahdin when the president came up to designate the waters, was it Waters and Woods?
Woods and Waters.
Woods and Waters, yeah. And everyone I talked to in northern Maine was realizing that all of the growth was coming from this outdoor industry that pulled up. So, and Mr. Turek, you know, Ryan Zinke, who's your fellow Montanan, I guess, frequently calls himself a Teddy Roosevelt conservationist. Would a recommendation from him to modify or rescind a national monument measure up to the conservation legacy of Teddy Roosevelt?
Of course not. First of all, Representative, I was going to wear a cowboy hat today,
bring
but
your dog.
I don't own one as big as his because it would blow off in Montana. No, it would not. The Antiquities Act was created to give the president the power. That's simple. And when all these moves to change that, to say we have to have more public input, is giving up what is your responsibility here in Congress. And your responsibility in Congress is, if a president creates something so egregious, you have the power to undo it. Don't put a layer in there stopping the president from creating something, because nothing will ever be created, and we know that. It has never. We go back to almost every park in the nation. It was created almost with bloodshed at sometimes. So no, it doesn't represent anything to do with
Thank you very much,
conservation.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And thank you for that point. One of the reasons that I believe that not only for the good value involved, that President Obama made the designations that he's made and could have made more. The point being that we got to this situation because there was a failure on the part of the majority in this Congress, in the House of Representatives, to expand any national park, to declare any wilderness areas, to add protections to. And at some point, those actions are still needed, whether this group wants to deal with it or not. And I sometimes feel that, I believe very strongly that President Obama in his designations took the responsibility that Congress had and took it upon the executive office to do what he did. It's a failure of action on the part of Congress that we have these monument designations to number, a failure of action on their part, and to now point the finger at Obama and to the Antiquities Act is borders on dereliction of not doing your duty when it's your turn. But let me now ask Mr. Soto for any comments or questions that he might have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, what we have at stake here is a a legacy that so many of us have all worked together to support, to have these treasures here in the United States be preserved for not only current generations but future generations. And each one of these areas that we've been talking about, from Upper Missouri River Breaks to Oregon Mountains and Desert Peaks, or OMDP as we're calling it, Bears Ears, and so many others, the San Gabriel Mountains and the like, really are treasures that need to be preserved. And so the first question I have to the panel is, what could we all be doing better to get the word out about how important these monuments are to Americans and encouraging them to utilize them more? As members of Congress, what could we do to help empower you all to get that message out? It's an open question to the panel.
First of all, thank you for having this forum. This is huge. And second, we are eager to work with each of you in, for example, drafting op-ed pieces for media, what we used to call newspapers, locally as well as nationally. Those are two opportunities right there. Having materials in your offices, not only here in D.C., but in your home offices, on these very issues, on this forum, on the values at stake. Those are simply some suggestions. I turn to my esteemed allies for even more.
And thank you for that question. What I would encourage, in addition to telling our stories, it is our job to share those stories with you, and then to have you share those with your colleagues in order to make the case. Because I think when you hear about the stories of veterans using monuments as a place of solitude and peace and comfort, and when you hear of minority communities and people of color having access to public lands and understanding how their role in the public lands contribute to the cultural fabric of our country, I think those stories and sharing those stories with passion and commitment will help us. But I think also highlighting what our communities are doing. For example, as I'd mentioned in a conversation yesterday, of not negating the importance of preservation and conservation, but also understanding that we are on a marketing campaign to protect our monuments. And we have to create these images, these opportunities in our media and in our communities in order to strengthen that, even though for us it's kind of a no-brainer because we already know how important our monuments are. But when we start getting the word out more and more to those that are opposed to this and want to remove the Antiquities Act or resize or reduce our monuments, that we highlight those. In Las Cruces, we did 31 days of monumental love. And we had all of our businesses that are members of the Green Chamber talk about how important the monument is to them. And by sharing that, and that was shared on social media, and I'm very grateful for all of those who did, but showing and highlighting that there are different collaborations and partnerships that can be created that really show how much a protected public space impacts our community. It's not just protecting the land, but it's protecting the land so that it will help our economy, that it will help support our youth, that it will help support all of the residents of our community, regardless of color or socioeconomic status. And I think that's where your help can come in.
And I think I want to transition to the next question, which is, it would be great to have economic impact studies of each of these monuments. We have a lot of heavy hitter nonprofits, companies, and stakeholders, not only on this panel, but folks who are listening in and watching here. This would be a worthy investment for some of our peers that may not be as great of friends to nature, but do care about jobs and economic impact. And so I would help us make the case with well-reasoned economic studies of each of these monuments and what it means for jobs. And then lastly, I wanted to ask for Mr. Vessels. I'm working on language for agriculture opportunities for therapeutic means for U.S. Army veterans, but it would be great to expand language for the budget if we already don't have programs in place to combine therapeutic opportunities in our parks for our veterans in a more formal program if one doesn't already exist. So it'd be great if you could just touch on that on my last question.
Yeah, of course. I'd be more than happy to help you with that language as well. I feel like I should highlight, we're currently partnered with UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center and REI in a coalition called the Great Outdoors Lab. And this is one of the first studies to actually collect quantitative physiological data to support the benefits of being outdoors. Studies in the past have been qualitative, just written surveys and such. But this is studying the science of awe and the physical and mental effects of time spent outdoors. We are going into the fourth year of this study, and how it works is we collect cortisol, cortisol levels and other hormones before whitewater rafting and after. And overall, the studies have shown that after just a day of whitewater rafting, there's a 30% decrease in post-traumatic stress symptoms. There's an improvement in sleep quality. There's an increase in curiosity and interconnectedness with others. So it's really exciting, and we're hoping to have that hard data to back up the importance of getting veterans and getting others outdoors.
If I may, let me, they've called votes, so I want to make sure that my colleagues, Ms. Hsu and Mr. Lowenthal, have an opportunity to ask the panel some questions. Ms. Hsu?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Robert Garcia, for being here and talking about our beautiful San Gabriel Mountains, which are at the northern edge of LA County, and they are in my district. For decades, it was in disrepair, lack of trails, lack of signage, all kinds of trash, graffiti, and chaotic parking. And so we desperately needed help. So when President Obama designated the San Gabriel Mountains a national monument in 2014, it was such a great step forward for the 2 million people of Los Angeles County who could finally have a way of being with nature. And as a result, the San Gabriels received $10.5 million in additional funding. Graffiti removal, trash cleanup, and trail improvements was done. We got a monument manager, volunteer coordinator, partnership coordinator, field rangers. It was an incredible improvement, and we cannot give this up. So that's why we have to fight so hard to make sure that we continue to have the Antiquities Act and our national monuments. And I'll just ask, Mr. Vessels, your story was so moving. Can you remember the moment in which you felt that mental health-wise, that things had turned around for you?
Yeah, I was actually in Desolation Wilderness up near Tahoe with my dog. And I went off trail a little bit to an alpine lake, and there was still some snow on the mountain. But it was perfect temperatures, no mosquitoes out, and I was just sitting there looking at the water with my dog next to me, and just felt at peace. It's something I hadn't felt in a very long time. And I'm lucky enough to experience that every so often when I'm in Bears Ears or the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge or anywhere else. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I was going to call you Chair, but remember our focus is on 2018, and Ranking Member Grijalva, we will be proudly calling him Chair Grijalva at that point. I'm not kidding. I think this has been wonderful. It's been educational. At some point, I'd really also, I'm a psychologist also. Judy and I are the two psychologists. People often tell me, well, why are you going to such a dysfunctional place? In part, it's to hear some of the stories and the uplifting experiences that people have, like Mr. Vessels. And I think that's been very, very positive. And I think it's a message that all of us, the healing capacities, it's very, very important that we build those into our lives. You were talking about a specific case, but it really, in the general, we all need healing. We all need safe places. We all need to be rejuvenated, and I think that's wonderful that you shared it. I just want to say one thing that really concerns me, and also then to give credit. Not only do I want to give credit before we leave to Congresswoman Hsu, who really led the effort the San Gabriel Mountains Monument, which she doesn't receive enough credit for. You know, she really is the reason that we have it. And I also want to thank, I've been working on for a long time with, and carry the legislation, the Bears Ears National Monument is part of an area that I have been advocating for Congress to protect through the Red Rock Wilderness Act. And I have to give credit to another group that's not here, and that's SUA, which is the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance. Like yourselves, they have been out there fighting to protect the monuments. And we also have to realize that Bears Ears, which is about 1 million acres, is holy, sacred grounds to the Navajo Nation. And it has been desecrated, cultural sites have, and we need to protect this for not only ourselves, as we point out, for our ability to kind of rejuvenate, but for future generations, and for the protection and for the of these sacred Navajo sites for the Navajo people themselves. So I'm just really glad to be here, to be a supporter. I cannot thank you enough for all the work that you're doing, and I think you're right. We need to stand up and talk about ourselves, about the wonderful stories about both economically, environmentally, in terms of environmental justice for all peoples, and the importance of national monuments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You learn something every day. I mean, that now I understand some things. I'm sitting between two psychologists.
Right. You're in good shape.
I told Judy, I was wondering why you guys drive me crazy, but
And then we'll help you.
I know
so
that.
we drive you crazy, and then we bring you back.
I want to thank you very much. This struggle that we're confronting is real with the Antiquities Act. The agenda being driven more by industry than by the people that are in front of me and the people that are on this dais. There is no multi-use. There is one use that's being promoted for our public lands and for our monuments. That's the overall struggle. But I think both the credibility and the sustainability of this administration is in question. And so our job before us is to defend these laws that have meant well and done well for the American people, and in the process build a constituency for the future that when threats like these crop up, that the constituency will be so big, so diverse, so strong that it won't happen. And I appreciate what Mr. Soto said. One of the arguments that we need to counter is this issue that it's about jobs versus the environment. That's a bogus issue. But in order to talk to people, in order to be able to relate directly on that issue, your experiences, your information, your data is important and vital to us. Because there's a lot at stake here, and you know it. And all of you that have been meeting with members in this period that you've been here, it's been very important. And the people on the dais here, just like you, understand how critical this fight is and how important it is that we not lose any ground and that we sustain what we have, and then in the future grow on that. With that, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it very much.